Today we're going to talk about succession. What is succession? Succession is when a new ecosystem is being created or an old ecosystem is starting over. This can occur in land or underwater. There are two types of succession. We have primary succession and secondary succession. Primary succession is when a new ecosystem is being created. Secondary succession is when an old ecosystem has to start over. So let's take a look at primary succession first. Most important thing you have to know about primary succession is that we start with no soil, start with bare rock only. The only two examples that you would have to know on how primary succession occurs would be volcanic eruptions or a retreat of a glacier. So when a glacier melts, you would have bare rock underneath, and that would be the start of primary succession. Something else to note is primary succession, the first living organisms to enter here would be a lichen. Lichens are photosynthetic organisms that do not need soil in order to grow and survive. So these lichens can grow and survive on bare rock. Last thing to take note of is that primary succession takes hundreds of years to reach the climax community. The climax community is when the forest or the ecosystem is at its peak. It's the largest that it will get. Next, let's take a look at secondary succession. Secondary succession is when a former ecosystem has to start over or has to reestablish itself. Examples of this occurring would be floods, fires, landslides. These would cause a complete or climax community to have to start over. Now, something to note here is that secondary succession starts with soil. So there may already be living things in the secondary succession. Remember, primary succession starts with no life. Secondary succession, that's not the case. You may have plants left over, insects, even animals that did not leave after the fire or flood. Something else to take note of for secondary succession is that it may take as little as 150 years for the ecosystem to reach its climax community. So secondary succession reaches its climax community much quicker than primary succession. Just a quick recap or comparison. Primary succession begins with no life, no soil. It's a brand new ecosystem that is growing. Lichens are the first living organism to enter the picture of primary succession, and the biomass or amount of living organisms is much lower in primary succession. Secondary succession is caused by a fire, flood, landslide, something that takes a former ecosystem and makes it start over. Soil is already present in secondary succession, so is some life. There may be plants, there may be insects, there may be animals that are already there at the beginning of secondary succession. Take a look at this Venn diagram. This will give you just a couple more examples of comparisons between primary and secondary succession.